All right, we are going to jump into chapter 2 from Witch of Blackbird Pond. I'm not doing this live, again, as I said in my video for Roll of Thunder, because the live videos, the audio cuts in and out, and the picture quality is garbage. So until the new camera comes, and until I can get myself a new Ethernet cable, I'm going to fix this a little bit. Boop. Until I can get myself an Ethernet cable to hardline into my internet so that I don't have all those jumps and skips, I'm going to only do one live video every morning at 10, and then I'll post the rest of the videos during the day as I film them. And I'm only going to do them in short little spurts, and I might do multiple videos for each chapter just so that they upload faster, because YouTube doesn't like to upload anything that's longer than 10 minutes, or it's like 5 hours of download time. It's like, why are you so mean? Why? All right, chapter 2 starts on page 14 for Witch of Blackbird Pond. Here we go. It took 9 days for the Dolphin to make the 43-mile voyage from Saybrook to Wethersfield. As though the ship were bewitched, from the moment they left Saybrook, everything went wrong. With the narrowing of the river, the fresh sea breeze dropped behind, and by sunset it died away altogether. The sails sagged limp and soundless, and the Dolphin rolled sickeningly in midstream. One or two evenings a temporary breeze raised their hopes and sent the ship a few miles, only to die away again. In the morning, Kit could scarcely tell that they had moved. The dense brown forest on either side never seemed to vary, and ahead there was only a new bend in the river to tantalize her. "How can you stand it?" she fumed to a red-headed sailor who was taking advantage of the windless hours to give the carved Dolphin on the prow a fresh coat of paint. "Doesn't the wind ever blow on this river?" "Mighty seldom, ma'am," he responded with indifferent good humor. "You get used to it. We'll spend most of the summer waiting for a breeze, going or coming." "How often do you go up this river?" "Every few weeks. We make a run, say to Boston or New Orleans, fill up the hold, and then back to Hartford." She could see why Mistress Eaton chose to stay at home in Saybrook. "Does it always take as long as this?" "Call this long?" the sailor replied, swinging far out to daub the curving tail of the Dolphin. "Why, ma'am, I've known it to take as many days to get from here to Hartford as to go all the way to Jamaica. But I'm in no hurry. The Dolphin's home to me, and I'm satisfied, wind or no wind." Kit was ready to fly to pieces with frustration. How could she eke out the patience that had been scarcely enough to see her through a few remaining hours? And how could she force herself to endure another meal at the same board with Goodwife Cruff and her cowed shadow of a husband? Never a civil word had been spoken by either one of them. Plainly they considered the becalmed ship all her doing, and it spoiled her appetite just to watch that miserable little wraith of a child, Prudence, not even allowed to sit at board with them, but kept behind her mother, where she had to eat standing up the stingy portion they handed back to her. Once or twice she had seen the father furtively slip the child an extra morsel from his plate, but he was plainly too spineless to stand up for her against his shrew of a wife. A more unpromising child she had never seen, Kit thought, yet she couldn't get Prudence out of her mind. There was some spark in that small frame that refused to be quenched. Late one afternoon Kit had come upon the little girl standing alone by the rail, and seeing the child's wistful, adoring gaze, had moved closer. As they stood side by side, a crane rose slowly from the beach, with a graceful lift of its great wings, and they followed its flight, a leisurely line of white against the dark trees. The child had gasped, tilting back her head, her peaked little face aglow with wonder and delight. But in that instant a harsh call from the hatchway sent her scurrying. With a pang Kit realized that not once since they boarded the ship had she glimpsed the wooden doll. Had her own rash performance only served to cheat the child of the one toy she possessed? They were certainly not good at forgetting, these New Englanders. Captain Eaton treated her with punctilious caution. Nat remained aloof, absorbed in a totally male world of rigging and canvas. On such a small ship it was remarkable how he managed to avoid her. A few times she happened to be indirectly in his path. He tossed her an indifferent grin, and his quizzical blue eyes flicked past and dismissed her. "If it weren't for John Holbrook, I couldn't bear it," she thought. "He is the only one on the ship who doesn't seem to begrudge my existence. He doesn't mind the delay, either. I believe he's actually grateful for it." She looked with envy at where he sat, propped against a bulkhead, lost in a bulky brown volume. What could there be in those books of his? There he sat, hour after hour, so intent that often his lips moved and 2 spots of color burned in his pale cheeks, as though some secret excitement sprang from the pages. Sometimes he forgot meals entirely. Only when he had wrung the last dregs of light from the sunset, and the shadows reached across the water and fell upon his book, would he reluctantly raise his head and become aware of the ship again. When that moment came, Kit made sure that his eyes, blinking half blindly from his book, would focus on her gay, silk-clad figure near by. John would smile, mark his place with deliberation, and come to join her. In the soft half-darkness, his stiff manners gradually relaxed into a boyish eagerness. Slowly, Kit pieced together the details of what seemed to her an appallingly dull story. I suppose it was foolish for a tanner's son even to think about Harvard, John told her. It was 6 miles to the school, and my father could never spare me for more than a month or so out of the year. He wanted me to learn, though. He never minded how long I burned the candles at night. You mean you worked all day and studied at night? Was it worth it? Of course it was worth it, he answered, surprised at her question. I was set on college. I finished all the requirements in Latin. I know the accidents almost by heart. But you're not going to Harvard. He shook his head. Up till this spring, I kept hoping I could save money enough. I planned to walk over the foot trails through Connecticut and across Massachusetts. Well, the Lord didn't see fit to provide the money, but now he has opened another way for me. Reverend Bulkley of Wethersfield has agreed to take me as a pupil. He is a very famous scholar, in medicine as well as theology. I couldn't have found a more learned teacher, even at Harvard. Such frank talk about money embarrassed Kit. Her grandfather had seldom mentioned such a thing. She herself had rarely seen much as held a coin in her hand, and for 16 years she had never questioned the costly and beautiful things that surrounded her. In the last few months, to be sure, she had had a terrifying glimpse of what it might mean to live without money, but it seemed shameful to speak of it. Instead, she tried to tell him of her childhood, and it was as though they each spoke a totally different language. She saw that John was scandalized at the way she had grown up on the island, running free as the wind in a world filled with sunshine. The green palms, the warm turquoise ocean rolling into white beaches meant nothing to him. Didn't her parents give her work to do, he insisted. I don't remember my parents at all, she told him. My father was born on the island and was sent to England to school. He met my mother there and brought her back to Barbados with him. They had only 3 years together. They were both drowned on a pleasure trip to Antigua, and grandfather and I were left alone. Were there no women to care for you? Oh, slaves, of course. I had a black nursemaid, but I never needed anyone but grandfather. There were no words to explain grandfather. In the twilight, the memory of him was always very sharp. The soft pink aging skin on his fine cheekbones, the thin aristocratic nose, the eyes so shrewd and yet so loving. She dared not trust her voice. It must have been hard to lose him, said John gently. I'm so glad you have an aunt to come to. She was my mother's only sister, said Kit, the tight pain easing a little. Grandfather says my mother talked about her the livelong day and never got over being homesick for her. Her name is Rachel, and she was charming and gay, and they said she could have had her pick of any man in her father's regiment. But instead, she fell in love with a Puritan and ran away to America without her father's blessing. She wrote to my mother from Wethersfield, and she has written a letter to me every year of my life. She's going to be very happy to see you. I've tried so hard to imagine Aunt Rachel, she mused. Grandfather said that my mother was thin and plain, like me, but Aunt Rachel was beautiful. Her hair and eyes will be dark, I suppose, like mine. But what will her voice be like? My mother remembered that she was always laughing. John Holbrook looked earnestly at the girl. Whoop, turn that off. John Holbrook looked earnestly at the girl beside him. That was a great many years ago, he reminded her. Don't forget, your aunt has been away from England for a long time. Kit was aware again of that intangible warning that she could not interpret. Every day of this delay made it harder for her to shake off her uneasiness. And I'm going to go ahead and end this video there, and I'm going to let you ponder what you think that warning Kit is feeling might be. I will drop another video to finish this chapter later on. Leave comments and questions, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.